In the perpetual darkness of the 41st millennium, where war consumes entire star systems and the laughter of thirsting gods echoes through the warp, there exists a species that thrives on conflict like no other. The Orks, those green-skinned fungal warriors, charge headlong into battles that would break the spirits of lesser races. They roar with glee as they hurl themselves into storms of gunfire, their crude weapons raised high, their tusked faces split with savage grins. Fear, as most species understand it, seems alien to the Ork psyche. They embrace death in combat as merely another part of the greatest game in the galaxy, and when they fall laughing, convinced they will return for another go at the fighting. Yet even among this race of savage warriors who view existence itself as one endless, glorious brawl, there are moments when something fundamental shifts. There are encounters on the battlefield that penetrate even the thick-skulled confidence of the greenskins, forcing them to confront a reality that contradicts everything they believe about combat and conquest. These moments are rare, precious to those who fight against the green tide, and devastating to Ork momentum. Among all the terrors that can break an Ork charge, among all the weapons that can shatter their battle lust, few are as effective as the towering ancient war machines known as Space Marine Dreadnoughts. The image of an Ork retreating from battle seems almost contradictory to everything we know about these Xenos. After all, this is a species that actively seeks out the most dangerous fights they can find, that measures success not by survival, but by the quality of the scrap. An Ork who dies in glorious combat is honored among his kind, while one who lives through a boring fight is pitied. They are creatures of pure aggression, their entire biology and culture shaped around the single purpose of warfare. The Wach, energy that binds them together, grows stronger with numbers and enthusiasm, creating a psychic feedback loop that makes large Ork forces nearly immune to fear, doubt, or any sensible preservation instinct. But Dreadnoughts represent something that defies even Ork logic and enthusiasm. These walking tombs of ceramite and adamantium, piloted by the near-dead heroes of the Adeptus Astartes, combine everything that an Ork finds difficult to process. They possess the size and strength that Orks respect and fear. They demonstrate a level of invulnerability that even the most enthusiastic Ork cannot ignore. Most importantly, they embody an implacable, relentless quality that stands in stark contrast to the chaotic, emotional nature of Ork warfare. Where an Ork charges with wild abandon, a Dreadnought advances with the inexorable patience of a glacier, crushing everything in its path with methodical precision. Understanding why Orks fear Dreadnoughts in close combat requires us to delve deep into both species, to understand the peculiar psychology that makes Orks simultaneously the most fearless and most vulnerable warriors in the galaxy. It requires us to examine the nature of these ancient war machines, to understand what makes them uniquely terrifying, even among the countless horrors of the 41st millennium. And it requires us to look at the rare, precious moments when the unstoppable green tide finally meets something it cannot overcome through sheer enthusiasm and numbers. This is not simply a tale of one weapon system being superior to another in some abstract tactical sense. This is about the fundamental clash between two entirely different philosophies of war, two radically different ways of understanding violence and conflict. The Orks believe that enough enthusiasm and violence can overcome any obstacle, that the biggest and loudest always wins, that fighting itself is the ultimate purpose and joy of existence. Dreadnoughts, piloted by warriors who have already died once and been given the burden of fighting for centuries more, represent a commitment to duty and capability that transcends mere enthusiasm. They are violence refined, distilled down to its most efficient and terrifying form, stripped of all the chaos and joy that Orks find in battle. The Ork mind, understanding fearlessness and its limits. To understand what frightens an Ork, we must first understand what makes them fearless in the first place. The orc species represents one of the galaxy's most successful and widespread examples of biological warfare engineering. Created by the ancient Old Ones as weapons in their war against the Necrons and the C'tan, orcs are not simply another intelligent species that happen to evolve toward violence. They are purpose-built killing machines, their every biological system optimized for combat and conquest, their psychology shaped to make them the perfect warriors. The orc life cycle begins with spores, microscopic fungal reproductive units that drift on the wind or are released when an orc dies. These spores grow in the soil, eventually producing first the diminutive snotlings, then the slightly larger Gretchen, and finally the orcs themselves. This reproductive system means that any world touched by orcs will continue producing them potentially forever, each new generation spawning from the corpses and cast-off spores of the previous one. It is a biological design of terrifying efficiency, creating warriors who require no childhood, no training, and no complex infrastructure to reach fighting capacity. But the true genius of orc design lies not in their physical form, but in their psychic nature. Every orc possesses a degree of latent psychic power, though in most individual orcs, this power manifests unconsciously and weakly. When orcs gather together, however, their collective psychic field strengthens dramatically, creating what they call the WAG. This is not merely a battle cry or a cultural concept, but an actual psychic phenomenon that shapes reality around orc populations. The WAG field makes orc technology function despite its crude construction. It strengthens orc confidence and resolve, and most importantly for our purposes, it creates a collective sense of invincibility that grows stronger with numbers. An orc fighting alone or in a small group will demonstrate something approaching normal self-preservation instincts. He will retreat from overwhelming odds, seek cover from incoming fire, and generally behave in ways that suggest he understands the concept of danger. But place that same orc among hundreds or thousands of his kind, let the WAG energy build to a fever pitch, and his behavior transforms entirely. Now he charges without hesitation into the most withering fire, convinced that he is invincible, that the enemy's weapons cannot possibly stop him, that victory is not just possible, but inevitable. This is not stupidity or ignorance, but a fundamental alteration of consciousness caused by psychic feedback. The Wah effect explains why orc armies often seem to operate with complete disregard for casualties or tactical sense. From an outside perspective, watching orcs charge across open ground directly into prepared defensive positions appears suicidal. But from within, the Wah, surrounded by roaring comrades and buoyed by collective psychic energy, each individual orc feels genuinely confident that he will survive, that he will reach the enemy and crush them in glorious combat. The deaths of his fellows barely register as warnings because the WAG energy insulates him from fear and doubt. This phenomenon creates a self-reinforcing cycle of aggression. As more orcs join a fight, the WAG grows stronger. As the WAG grows stronger, individual orcs become more fearless and aggressive. This increased aggression attracts more orcs to the fight, further strengthening the psychic field. A single orc warband can snowball into a massive invasion force through this mechanism, each victory adding to their confidence and drawing more greenskins to the growing Wah! Yet this system, for all its effectiveness, contains inherent vulnerabilities. The Wah effect requires continuous reinforcement through success and numbers. When an orc force begins to take heavy casualties without inflicting corresponding damage on the enemy, the collective confidence begins to waver. Individual orcs start to notice that their fellows are dying in large numbers. The psychic feedback loop that made them feel invincible begins to reverse, and doubt creeps in where there was previously only certainty. Orcs do not experience fear in the same way humans or other species do. They do not lie awake at night worrying about their mortality or questioning the purpose of their existence. But they do recognize when they are losing a fight. when the scrap is not fun anymore, when continuing to fight means certain death without the glorious combat they crave. In these moments, orcs can and do retreat, though they rationalize it differently than other species might. To an orc, running away is not defeat, but merely a tactical pause, a chance to come back later and have another go at the enemy. They do not see it as cowardice, but as common sense, preserving themselves for future fights rather than dying in a bad scrap. This distinction is crucial for understanding orc psychology. They are not truly fearless in the sense of being unable to feel fear. Rather, they experience something we might call combat calculation, a crude assessment of whether a fight is worth continuing or whether it might be better to leg it and try again later. A good fight, one where there is lots of violence and a reasonable chance of winning, will keep orcs engaged, even in the face of horrific casualties. A bad fight, one where they are simply being slaughtered without getting to inflict damage in return, will eventually cause even the most enthusiastic orcs to reconsider their participation. The key factor in breaking orc morale is not simply killing them in large numbers. Orcs expect to die in combat and accept it as part of the natural order. What breaks their spirits is killing them in ways that prevent them from fighting back effectively, that rob them of the joy of combat and the satisfaction of inflicting violence on their enemies. An orc who charges into a fortified position and dies trading blows with the defenders dies content. An orc who is cut down by artillery fire before ever reaching the enemy, or who is killed so quickly he never gets to swing his chopper, dies frustrated, and his death sends ripples of doubt through his comrades. This vulnerability in the orc psyche creates opportunities for their enemies. If you can show orcs that fighting you will not be the glorious scrap they crave, but instead a one-sided slaughter where they die without achieving anything, you can break even the largest. The trick is having a weapon or tactic that can deliver this message quickly and brutally enough to overcome the momentum of orc enthusiasm and collective psychic reinforcement. This is where Dreadnoughts enter the equation, the walking tombs of the Adeptus Astartes. To understand why Dreadnoughts are uniquely effective at breaking orc charges, we must first understand what these machines are and what they represent in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. A Space Marine Dreadnought is not simply a robot or a vehicle, but rather a fusion of warrior and weapon, a mobile shrine containing what remains of a hero who should have died but was deemed too valuable to lose. Space Marines are already among the most formidable warriors in the galaxy, enhanced far beyond baseline human capability through genetic engineering, surgical implantation of additional organs, and decades of brutal training. A single Space Marine represents years of investment and resources, a living weapon capable of turning the tide of entire campaigns. When such a warrior falls in battle, his chapter mourns the loss not just of a brother, but of irreplaceable combat capability and accumulated wisdom. Most Space Marines who suffer mortal wounds in combat die despite the incredible resilience their enhanced physiology provides. But occasionally, a warrior is injured so severely that death is certain, yet has not quite arrived, leaving a narrow window where the chapter's tech marines and apothecaries can intervene. If the fallen warrior's service record justifies the effort, if his tactical knowledge and combat experience are valuable enough, and if enough of his body remains intact to sustain brain function, he becomes a candidate for internment in a dreadnought. The process of creating a dreadnought is complex and painful, beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. The Space Marine's shattered body is stabilized, stripped of limbs and organs that cannot be saved. And what remains, usually little more than a torso and head, containing the brain and essential organs, is sealed within an armored sarcophagus filled with life-sustaining amniotic fluid. Direct neural connections interface the warrior's mind with the dreadnought chassis, allowing him to perceive through its sensors and control its massive limbs as if they were his own body. The warrior becomes the machine, his consciousness the ghost in the shell, his will the animating force that turns tons of adamantium and ceramite into a weapon of terrifying capability. This transformation is considered a great honor by Space Marine chapters, a way for their greatest heroes to continue serving the Emperor even after mortal wounds would have claimed them. But it is also a terrible burden. The warrior within the Dreadnought is forever separated from normal existence, unable to walk among his brothers as he once did, unable to experience the simple pleasures of physical existence. His world becomes one of sensor feeds and tactical data, his human form reduced to a few organs floating in preservative fluids, while his mind slowly erodes across centuries of service. Between deployments, most dreadnoughts are kept in stasis sleep to preserve their sanity. The mental strain of interfacing with such a large and complex machine, combined with the isolation and the slow realization that everyone they once knew has died while they endure, can drive dreadnought pilots mad. Even with stasis sleep, many dreadnoughts eventually lose their grip on sanity or their memories of who they were before internment. Ancient dreadnoughts, who have served for millennia, often display signs of severe mental degradation, their personalities compressed down to pure warrior instinct, their memories of their mortal existence faded to near nothing. Yet despite these psychological costs, dreadnoughts remain among the most effective weapons in the Space Marine arsenal. A standard castroferum pattern, Dreadnought, the most common type deployed across the Imperium, stands approximately twice the height of a Space Marine and mounts a heavy ranged weapon on one arm and a massive close combat weapon on the other. This configuration makes dreadnoughts incredibly versatile, equally capable of providing heavy fire support or crushing enemies in melee combat. The physical specifications of a dreadnought are staggering. The chassis is constructed from adamantium, one of the hardest and most durable materials known to the Imperium, and plated with layers of ceramite armor that can withstand direct hits from anti-tank weapons. The dreadnought's internal systems include a powerful reactor that drives both its weapon systems and its mobility, synthetic muscle bundles made from electrofiber that provide strength far exceeding even a Space Marine's enhanced physiology, and redundant systems that allow it to continue functioning even after sustaining catastrophic damage. A dreadnought's dreadnought close combat weapon, typically a massive power fist or power claw, represents one of the most devastating melee weapons in existence. Unlike the man-portable power fists used by Terminators and other elite infantry, a dreadnought's power fist has no practical size or weight limitations. The dreadnought's massive frame and powerful servos can swing a weapon weighing several tons with the same ease that a human might swing a sword. This weapon is not just large, but also generates a powerful disruption field that tears apart molecular bonds in whatever it strikes, allowing it to shear through armor plate as if it were paper. The combination of size, weight, and disruption field technology makes a dreadnought's punch capable of destroying tanks in a single blow. Enemy vehicles struck by a dreadnought power fist are typically torn open, their armor crumpled like tin, their internal structure collapsed. Infantry caught in the path of such a weapon are not simply killed, but obliterated, their bodies reduced to unrecognizable pulp by forces that would make a hydraulic press seem gentle. The dreadnought can grab enemies with its fists clamping fingers and literally crush them to death, or it can sweep its arm in wide arcs that clear entire areas of enemy troops. Beyond their physical capabilities, dreadnoughts carry psychological weight that amplifies their battlefield effectiveness. Each dreadnought is a venerated hero of its chapter, a warrior who has served for decades or even centuries, accumulating combat experience that spans multiple lifetimes. When a dreadnought speaks, it does so with the voice of the chapter's history, recounting battles fought before the current generation of Marines was even recruited. This gives dreadnoughts an almost mystical quality among Space Marines, who revere them as living connections to their chapter's past and as repositories of tactical wisdom. For enemies of the Imperium, dreadnoughts represent something different but equally terrifying. They are proof that even death cannot stop the Emperor's warriors, that the Imperium's commitment to humanity's survival transcends individual mortality. To face a dreadnought is to confront a being that has already died once, that has nothing left to lose, that fights not out of survival instinct, but out of duty and purpose, refined across lifetimes of warfare. This makes dreadnoughts utterly implacable opponents, immune to the psychological tactics that might work on ordinary soldiers or even regular space marines. The various patterns of dreadnought deployed across the Imperium offer different specializations and capabilities, but all share certain characteristics. The ancient Contemptor pattern, dating back to the Great Crusade, is faster and more agile than later designs while mounting equally impressive firepower. The massive Leviathan pattern is specifically designed for siege warfare, mounting heavy armor and devastating short-range weapons that can tear through fortifications and enemy armor with equal ease. The newer Redemptor pattern, designed for Primaris Space Marines, sacrifices pilot longevity for increased combat capability, burning through its occupant's life force more quickly, but providing enhanced firepower and resilience in exchange. Each pattern represents a different solution to the same fundamental challenge: how to take a mortally wounded warrior and transform him into a weapon capable of turning the tide of battle. The variations in approach reflect different priorities and available technologies, but the core concept remains constant. A dreadnought is a warrior who has transcended physical limitations, who has been reborn as something that blurs the line between man and machine, organic and mechanical, living and dead. The physics of dreadnought dominance. When an orc charges toward a dreadnought, he does so with the absolute confidence that comes from the wag field and his own considerable physical power. Orcs are large, typically standing between 6 and 8 feet tall when fully grown, and they possess natural strength that exceeds most other species. A big war boss, one who has grown large through countless victories, might stand even taller and possess the raw power to tear apart lesser enemies with his bare hands. An orc's natural confidence tells him that if he can just get close enough to hit the enemy, his strength will prevail. This confidence is usually well-founded when facing most opponents. Orc strength is legendary throughout the galaxy. They can shrug off wounds that would kill most species. Their pain tolerance is phenomenal, and their enthusiasm for combat gives them an edge in close quarters that terrifies most enemies. An orc mob charging into melee range represents one of the most dangerous forces in conventional warfare, a green wave of violence that can overwhelm even well-prepared defensive positions through sheer momentum and ferocity. But dreadnoughts operate on an entirely different scale of physical power. A standard Castroferum pattern. Dreadnought stands approximately 3 to 4 meters tall, meaning it towers over even the largest orc warboss. This height advantage is not merely intimidating, but provides significant tactical benefits. The dreadnought can see over obstacles that would block an orc's view, can bring its weapons to bear on elevated positions, and can step over barriers that would halt an orc's charge. The psychological effect of fighting an enemy that literally looms over you, that you must crane your neck to see the top of, cannot be understated. More important than height is mass. A dreadnought weighs several tons, its chassis constructed from some of the densest and most durable materials available to the Imperium. When a dreadnought moves forward, it does so with the inexorable momentum of a tank, each step leaving deep impressions in the ground. This mass gives it stability that no organic creature can match. An orc might charge into a dreadnought at full speed, might try to knock it over or push it back, and will find himself bouncing off as if he had run into a wall. The dreadnought barely registers the impact. The strength differential is even more extreme. Orc strength is impressive by biological standards, allowing them to wield weapons that would crush a human and to tear through light armor with their hands. But a dreadnought's strength is mechanical, driven by powerful servo motors and hydraulic systems that generate forces measured in tons. A dreadnought can lift and throw objects weighing hundreds of kilograms as if they were toys. When that strength is focused through a close combat weapon designed specifically for destroying armored targets, the results are devastating beyond anything an orc could hope to achieve. Consider the physical reality of a dreadnought power fist striking an orc. The fist itself is massive, large enough that it could grip an orc's entire torso in its mechanical fingers. The servo motors driving the arm accelerate this mass to speeds that create impacts measured in multiple tons of force. The disruption field surrounding the fist tears apart molecular bonds on contact, meaning that even a glancing blow can shatter bones and rupture organs. When such a weapon strikes an orc squarely, the result is not simply death, but catastrophic physical destruction. An orc hit by a dreadnought power fist does not fall wounded. He explodes. His body, tough as it is by biological standards, cannot withstand forces designed to penetrate tank armor. The impact pulverizes bones, ruptures every organ simultaneously, and often literally tears the orc's body in half from the sheer kinetic energy transfer. Orcs nearby who witness this destruction cannot rationalize it away or convince themselves that they could survive such a blow. The physical evidence is too clear, too immediate, too visceral to deny. This overwhelming physical superiority extends to the dreadnought's defensive capabilities as well. Orc weapons, crude but effective against most enemies, find themselves utterly inadequate when faced with dreadnought armor. A typical orc slugger or shooter, a heavy pistol or rifle by human standards, fires large caliber projectiles with significant kinetic energy. These weapons can punch through the armor of lighter vehicles and can certainly kill unarmored infantry. But against dreadnought armor, they are little more than irritants. The ceramite armor plating that covers a dreadnought is designed to withstand anti-tank weaponry. Its composition includes ceramic compounds that disperse kinetic energy and heat, backed by layers of adamantium that provide structural strength. The armor is thick, measured in centimeters or even tens of centimeters in critical areas, and is sloped to deflect incoming fire rather than absorbing it directly. When orc small arms fire strikes this armor, the bullets simply flatten against it or ricochet off, leaving perhaps small scorch marks but causing no meaningful damage. Even heavier orc weapons struggle against dreadnought defenses. Big shooters, the heavy machine guns favored by orc mobs, fire larger rounds at higher velocities than basic orc firearms. These weapons can shred light vehicles and make short work of infantry in cover, but against a dreadnought, they achieve little more than the smaller weapons do. The rounds impact the armor with impressive-looking flashes and bangs, but fail to penetrate. An orc firing a big shooter at a dreadnought might as well be throwing rocks at a bunker for all the good it does him. Rocket launchers, orc rocket launchers that fire crude but effective anti-armor missiles, represent more serious threats. These weapons can destroy light vehicles and damage heavier armor with direct hits. But even rockets often fail to penetrate dreadnought armor, especially when they strike the thickest plating. The orc-made warheads, while powerful, lack the sophisticated penetration mechanisms of Imperial or other advanced civilizations' anti-tank weapons. They explode against the dreadnought's hull with impressive force, but often fail to breach the armor beneath. This invulnerability to most orc weaponry creates a feedback loop of psychological pressure. Orcs watch their shots bounce harmlessly off the dreadnought's armor. They see their comrades firing everything they have at the advancing machine with no visible effect. The wah field that normally sustains their confidence begins to crack as the evidence of futility accumulates. If their weapons cannot hurt the enemy, if their strength cannot match it, if their numbers mean nothing against something that shrugs off everything they can throw at it, then what chance do they have? The dreadnought's stride itself becomes a psychological weapon. It does not rush forward in a chaotic charge like an orc. It advances with steady, measured steps, each footfall shaking the ground, each movement deliberate and purposeful. This mechanical patience is deeply unsettling to orcs, whose entire experience of combat revolves around chaos, speed, and enthusiasm. The Dreadnoughts' slow advance suggests that it has all the time in the world, that nothing the Orks do can stop or even slow it, that their fate is inevitable and they are merely delaying the moment when the machine reaches them. As the Dreadnought closes to melee range, the differential in physical capability becomes even more apparent. Orks, who have spent their entire lives believing that size and strength determine victory, suddenly confront an enemy that dwarfs them in both categories. The psychological impact of this realization, combined with the visual evidence of Orks being literally pulverized by the Dreadnought's blows, can break even the strongest wag field. Fear, that emotion Orks rarely experience, begins to creep into their consciousness as they realize they are not fighting another warrior, but facing an unstoppable killing machine. The ancient wisdom versus savage enthusiasm. Beyond the raw physical capabilities that make Dreadnoughts so formidable, there exists another dimension to their effectiveness that is perhaps even more devastating to Ork psychology. The vast gulf in combat experience and tactical acumen between the pilot of a Dreadnought and even the most veteran Ork warrior. This disparity represents not merely years or decades of additional training, but often centuries of accumulated battlefield knowledge, refined across thousands of engagements and distilled into an almost instinctive understanding of warfare. When an Ork charges into battle, he brings with him the accumulated knowledge of his species, the genetic memories encoded in his fungal DNA that tell him how to fight, how to use weapons, and how to recognize tactical situations. This innate knowledge is remarkable in its own right, allowing Orks to be effective warriors from the moment they emerge from their spore growth. An Ork knows how to swing a chopper, how to fire a gun, and how to recognize when to charge without ever being taught these things. The knowledge is simply there, part of his fundamental nature. As Orks survive battles and grow larger, they accumulate additional practical experience. A veteran Ork who has fought in dozens of scraps develops instincts about battlefield positioning, about when to press an attack and when to fall back temporarily, about how to maximize damage while minimizing risk. The biggest Orks, those who have risen to become war bosses or nobs, are survivors of countless battles, having demonstrated not just strength, but also a degree of tactical cunning that allowed them to succeed where others failed. Yet even the most experienced Ork war boss, one who has led dozens of successful wags and conquered multiple worlds, typically has only a few decades of accumulated combat experience at most. Orks who survive that long are rare, as their culture constantly involves them in dangerous fights, and their biology drives them to seek ever more challenging combat. A truly ancient Ork war boss might have 50 or even 100 years of experience, making him a formidable and cunning opponent by any standard. Compare this to a Space Marine Dreadnought who has served for 5 centuries, awoken from stasis for dozens of different campaigns, his memory stretching back through 500 years of continuous warfare. Consider the breadth of experience this represents. That Dreadnought has fought on hundreds of different worlds, against countless different enemies, in every type of terrain and tactical situation imaginable. He has seen Ork wags rise and fall. He has studied how they fight, identified their patterns and weaknesses, and developed counter-tactics refined across lifetimes of implementation. This ancient warrior has observed the evolution of Ork tactics across centuries. He can recognize which Ork clan he faces by their equipment and behavior, can predict their likely strategic choices based on the disposition of their forces, and can exploit the predictable patterns that Orks fall into, despite their individual variation. Where an Ork war boss might draw on decades of experience, the Dreadnought draws on centuries. Where the Ork relies on instinct and cunning, the Dreadnought operates from a foundation of systematic knowledge so vast, it approaches precognition in its effectiveness. The tactical superiority this experience provides manifests in countless subtle ways during combat. The Dreadnought knows exactly where to position itself to maximize the disruption of Ork charges. It understands how to prioritize targets, taking out knobs and other leaders whose deaths will cause maximum morale damage to the surrounding Orks. It can identify which Orks in a mob are the most dangerous, which are the most enthusiastic, and therefore most sustaining the War field, and eliminate them with surgical precision, even amidst the chaos of close combat. More importantly, the Dreadnought pilot understands Ork psychology in ways that the Orks themselves do not fully grasp. He knows that Orks grow in confidence and effectiveness when packed together, so he targets the densest concentrations of greenskins to maximize casualties per attack. He understands that Orks who watch their fellows die without being able to retaliate effectively will begin to lose heart, so he makes his kills as spectacular and demoralizing as possible. He recognizes that killing Ork leadership causes cascading failures in their command structure, so he prioritizes high-value targets even when other Orks present more immediate threats. This systematic understanding of how to break Ork morale represents knowledge that took centuries to accumulate and refine. It is the difference between a predator that hunts by instinct and one that has studied its prey for lifetimes, learning every weakness, every predictable response, every vulnerability in their psychology and tactics. The Ork charges with enthusiasm and genetic knowledge. The Dreadnought counters with a depth of experience that makes the engagement fundamentally asymmetric. The psychological impact on Orks when they encounter this level of tactical superiority is profound. Orks understand strength, they respect size, and they can appreciate good fighting. But they struggle to comprehend an enemy that seems to predict their every move, that always positions itself optimally, that never makes the mistakes that Orks expect enemies to make. It creates a sensation that even Orks, with their limited capacity for introspection, find deeply unsettling. The feeling that they are not fighting another warrior, but rather being systematically dismantled by something that understands them better than they understand themselves. This manifests in small moments during combat that accumulate into overwhelming psychological pressure. An Ork swings his chopper at what he thinks is an opening in the Dreadnought's defense, only to have his blow anticipated and countered before it can land. Another Ork tries to flank the Dreadnought, thinking he has found a blind spot, only to be crushed by a backhand blow that suggests the machine was aware of his position the entire time. A Nob attempts to rally his boys for a coordinated attack, only to be specifically targeted and eliminated by the Dreadnought before he can organize the assault. These individual failures might seem minor, but to Orks, they represent something deeply wrong with the situation. Orks expect combat to be chaotic, to involve luck and chance as much as skill. The Dreadnought's methodical dismantling of their attacks, its apparent ability to be everywhere it needs to be and counter everything they try, suggests a level of control over the battle that violates Ork assumptions about how fights work. It is not just that they are losing, it is that they are losing in a way that makes no sense to them, where their usual tactics and instincts seem useless. The Vox-amplified voice of the Dreadnought adds another dimension to this psychological warfare. When a Dreadnought speaks, it does so through external speakers in a mechanical, distorted voice that carries clearly across the battlefield. Many Dreadnoughts, drawing on centuries of experience, use this capability strategically. They issue threats not as expressions of anger, but as tactical tools designed to break enemy morale. A Dreadnought might announce in calm, mechanical tones that the Orks before it will all die today, that their War ends here, that they face an enemy they cannot defeat. These pronouncements carry weight because they come from a source that has already demonstrated its superiority. When a Dreadnought makes such a claim, it does so not as bravado, but as statement of fact, backed by 500 years of battlefield dominance. The mechanical voice strips away any hint of uncertainty or bluff. There is no emotion in it, no doubt, no fear of the Orks or concern about whether the statement is true. It simply states the reality as the ancient warrior sees it, with all the confidence of centuries behind the words. Orks, for all their bluster and enthusiasm, can recognize when they face a superior opponent. Their culture revolves around respecting strength and size, and a dreadnought embodies both qualities to an extent that even the biggest war boss cannot match. When that physically superior opponent also demonstrates tactical dominance, when it shows through its actions that it understands the battle better than the Orks do, when it makes pronouncements with absolute certainty about their impending defeat, even the WAG field begins to crack under the psychological pressure. The sound and fury of mechanical warfare. There is a particular auditory signature to a dreadnought in combat that contributes significantly to its psychological impact on Ork forces. The sounds of warfare vary tremendously depending on the weapons and armies involved. Ork combat is loud in a chaotic way, a cacophony of roaring engines, crude shooters firing without rhythm, choppers clanging against armor, and above all else, the continuous bellowing of Ork voices raised in their battle cries. This noise is part of what makes Ork combat so psychologically effective against many enemies. The sheer volume of sound, the constant roaring and clanging, can be overwhelming to those unprepared for it. But a dreadnought introduces sounds that cut through even Ork noise in ways that register on a primal level. The most characteristic is the servo motor whine, the high-pitched mechanical scream that accompanies every movement of the dreadnought's limbs. These sounds are not random, but precisely tied to the machine's actions. When the dreadnought raises its power fist to strike, the servos wind up with an ascending whine that peaks just before impact. That sound becomes a warning, a half-second notice that death is about to fall on whatever the dreadnought has targeted. Orks quickly learn to associate this servo whine with the death of their comrades. Every time they hear that characteristic sound, they see an Ork pulverized or torn apart by the dreadnought's weapons. The sound becomes a Pavlovian trigger, creating an involuntary fear response that bypasses the conscious mind. Even Orks caught in the fury of the wah, their enthusiasm at maximum levels, cannot help but flinch when they hear the servo motors wind up for another strike. Their bodies recognize the sound as a threat signal, even when their conscious minds remain committed to the fight. The footsteps of a dreadnought create another layer of psychological pressure. Each step produces a heavy, mechanical thud that can be felt as much as heard. The ground shakes slightly with each footfall, a tactile reminder of the machine's massive weight. The rhythm of these steps is relentlessly steady, maintaining the same pace regardless of what happens around the dreadnought. Incoming fire does not make it falter. Orks charging at it do not cause it to rush or retreat. The footsteps just continue, boom, 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 marking the inevitable approach of something that cannot be stopped or deflected. This auditory steadiness contrasts sharply with the chaotic sounds of Ork warfare. Where Ork movement is unpredictable, surging forward in rushes and then pausing, the dreadnought's advance is metronomic. Where Ork weapons fire in random bursts, the dreadnought's weapons discharge with careful aim. Where Orks roar and bellow in voices that crack and vary, the dreadnought's vox speakers emit words in a steady mechanical rasp that never changes in tone or volume. This contrast makes the dreadnought seem less like a living opponent and more like a force of nature, an inevitability rather than an enemy that can be fought and beaten. The weapon's fire adds its own psychological dimensions. A dreadnought-mounted assault cannon, one of the most common ranged weapons for these machines, produces a distinctive sound when it fires. Unlike the scattered pops of Ork shooters, the assault cannon creates a continuous buzzsaw roar as it spews out hundreds of heavy rounds per minute. The sound is uniform and sustained, lasting seconds at a time, rather than coming in discrete bursts. When Orks hear this sound, they know that somewhere in their formation, multiple greenskins are being shredded by a stream of fire that does not miss, does not jam, and does not stop until the target is destroyed. Heavy flamers mounted on dreadnoughts add the roar of igniting promethium to the battlefield soundscape. This is not the crackling of conventional flames, but a deeper, more aggressive sound. The whoosh of fuel being projected under high pressure and ignited at range. Orks hit by Dreadnought. Flamers do not die quietly. They scream as the promethium clings to them and burns through their tough skin, creating sounds of agony that carry clearly across the battlefield and remind every orc within hearing that the Dreadnought can kill them from range as easily as in melee. But perhaps the most psychologically effective sound a Dreadnought makes is the one that occurs when its power fist connects with an orc. There is a distinctive crack-squelch combination, the sound of bones shattering and flesh pulping simultaneously, followed sometimes by the clang of the impact against the orc's crude armor. This sound is organic and mechanical mixed together, visceral in a way that bypasses rational thought and triggers instinctive revulsion. Orcs hearing this sound know, without needing to see, that one of their number has just been obliterated. The accumulation of these sounds creates an auditory profile that orcs come to associate with defeat and death. The servo whine means an attack is coming. The footsteps mean the Dreadnought is approaching. The assault cannon roar means orcs are dying at range. The power fist impact sounds mean death in melee. Together, these sounds form a symphony of mechanical violence that penetrates even the bloodlust of the wag and creates a sense of impending doom. Orcs who have fought Dreadnoughts before and survived carry these sound memories with them. When these veterans hear a Dreadnought on a new battlefield, their bodies react before their minds fully process what is happening. The veteran orcs tense, their enthusiasm dims slightly, and most critically, their fear can infect other orcs around them through the whack field. A mob that contains veterans who fear Dreadnoughts enters combat with their collective confidence already compromised, making them more vulnerable to breaking when the Dreadnought begins its inevitable work. This auditory dimension of Dreadnought warfare is not accidental. Many veteran Dreadnought pilots deliberately use sound as a psychological weapon. They know that their servo motors, their footsteps, their weapons all create distinctive sounds that terrify enemies who have fought Dreadnoughts before. Some pilots even modulate their vox speaker output to maximize intimidation, lowering the pitch of their mechanical voices, or adding reverb effects that make them sound even less human and more like machines given voice. The goal is not simply to kill enemies, but to create an atmosphere of fear that breaks enemy formations before physical combat even begins. A Dreadnought that can terrify enemies into routing early saves itself the effort of physically destroying them, conserves ammunition, and can redirect its attention to other targets. The sounds it makes serve this purpose by creating associations between specific noises and certain death, training enemies through repeated exposure to fear the Dreadnought's presence on an instinctive level that bypasses conscious thought. For orcs, whose entire psychology revolves around confidence and aggression, having their bodies betray them with fear, responses to mere sounds is particularly devastating. It contradicts everything they believe about themselves as warriors. An orc who finds himself tensing at the sound of servo motors, who feels his enthusiasm waver when he hears those mechanical footsteps, experiences a crisis of identity. He is supposed to be fearless, to laugh in the face of danger, to relish combat regardless of the odds. Yet his body tells him to flee, to get away from whatever is making those terrible sounds. And this internal conflict paralyzes his ability to fight effectively. When the green tide breaks, the psychological collapse of an orc is not a subtle process. Unlike human armies that might gradually lose cohesion or experience slow erosion of morale, orcs fight with absolute commitment until a critical threshold is reached, after which their formation can shatter with startling suddenness. Understanding this binary nature of orc morale, how it remains solid until it catastrophically fails, is essential to understanding why Dreadnoughts are so effective at breaking greenskin charges. The wah field that binds orc forces together and sustains their aggression functions like a psychic dam. As long as the dam holds, the collective enthusiasm remains strong, casualties are shrugged off, and the green tide continues forward with undiminished ferocity. Orcs drawing on this field feel invincible, certain of victory, convinced that nothing can stop them. This confidence is self-reinforcing because each orc's enthusiasm feeds into the collective field, which in turn strengthens the resolve of every other orc in range. It is a positive feedback loop that makes orc mobs extraordinarily resistant to normal morale effects. But dams, no matter how strong, have breaking points. For an orc, wag! That breaking point occurs when the accumulated evidence of failure becomes too overwhelming for even the psychic field to rationalize away. It happens when too many orcs have died without inflicting corresponding casualties, when their weapons have proven useless, when their strength has been demonstrated insufficient, when the enemy they face cannot be overcome through any means available to them. At this moment, doubt enters the collective consciousness. This doubt spreads through the field like cracks spreading through ice under pressure. One orc begins to question whether the fight is worth continuing. His doubt weakens his contribution to the collective field. This weakening allows another orc to notice the mounting casualties and feel fear. That fear further weakens the field, which allows more orcs to recognize the hopelessness of their situation. What begins as isolated doubts in a few individuals quickly cascades into collective panic as the feedback loop that sustained their courage reverses and begins amplifying their fear instead. Dreadnoughts are particularly effective at triggering this cascade because they attack the field's fundamental assumptions. Orcs believe that size and strength determine victory. A dreadnought is bigger and stronger than them. Orcs believe that enthusiasm and aggression can overcome any obstacle. A dreadnought demonstrates that enthusiasm means nothing against sufficient armor and firepower. Orcs believe that there is always a way to hurt the enemy if you just hit them hard enough. A dreadnought proves them wrong by shrugging off everything they can throw at it. Each of these contradictions to orc beliefs weakens the wag field. But dreadnoughts do not simply contradict these beliefs in abstract terms. They provide visceral, immediate demonstrations that force orcs to confront the falseness of their assumptions. When an orc charges a dreadnought with all his strength and is battered aside like an insect, every orc who witnesses it must reconsider his belief in the supremacy of orc strength. When a mob empties their entire ammunition supply into a dreadnought and fails to even slow it down, they cannot maintain the belief that they can hurt anything with enough firepower. The visual impact of watching the dreadnought systematically kill orcs without taking meaningful damage itself accelerates this process. Orcs are not philosophers or intellectuals who deal in abstractions. They understand reality through direct, visceral experience. When they see an orc get pulverized by a power fist, when they watch a flamer reduce a dozen boys to charred corpses in seconds, when they observe the dreadnought walking through a fusillade of gunfire as if it were a light rain, these observations cannot be rationalized away or dismissed. The evidence is too immediate and too overwhelming. Leadership casualties compound the morale damage. In orc society, the biggest and strongest lead because they can physically dominate other orcs, and because their size provides evidence of combat success. When a dreadnought kills an orc nob or war boss, it does more than simply remove a tactical commander from the battlefield. It demonstrates that even the biggest, most successful orcs are helpless against the dreadnought. If the leaders, those who are supposed to be the toughest and most capable fighters, cannot hurt the dreadnought and get killed effortlessly when they try, what hope do the regular boys have? This creates a leadership void at precisely the moment when the orc mob most needs direction. Smaller orcs, who were taking orders from the now dead nob, suddenly must decide for themselves what to do. Some might try to step up and take charge, but they lack the size and established dominance to immediately command respect. Others look around for another leader to follow, and find only confusion and chaos. This leadership vacuum makes the mob vulnerable to the panic that is already spreading through their ranks. The moment when the wag breaks is often visible even from a distance. The green tide that was surging forward with apparently unlimited enthusiasm suddenly hesitates. Individual orcs begin backing away from the dreadnought, even while others continue trying to attack it. The coherent roar of orc voices fractures into individual shouts and screams. The mob that had been packed tightly together, deriving strength from proximity, begins to spread out as individual orcs try to put distance between themselves and the threat. Then someone runs. It might be an orc who has taken heavy casualties to his squad, or one who just watched the dreadnought kill a respected nob, or simply one whose nerve finally failed under the accumulated stress. That orc turns and legs it, running away from the dreadnought as fast as his massive frame can carry him. This single act of flight is like breaking a dam. Other orcs, already on the edge of panic, see their comrade fleeing and decide to do likewise. Within seconds, individuals fleeing becomes groups running, which becomes the entire mob rooting in disorder. This rooting process is actually rational from an orc perspective, even if it looks like panic to outside observers. Orcs do not see retreating as true defeat. In their worldview, running away from a bad fight just means they can come back later and have another go when the circumstances are better. An orc who roots from a dreadnought is not admitting he could never beat it, just acknowledging that he cannot beat it right now with the resources available. He is preserving himself for future fights where he might have better chances. But while this rationalization might protect an orc's self-image, it does not change the tactical reality. A rooting orc mob is no longer an effective combat force. The orcs are fleeing in panic, not conducting an organized withdrawal. They abandon equipment. They do not cover each other's retreat. They simply run. Many will be cut down by ranged fire as they flee. Others will scatter so widely that they effectively remove themselves from the battle, even if they survive. The coherent that threatened to overwhelm defensive positions minutes ago dissolves into individuals and small groups concerned only with their own survival. The psychological impact on these rooting orcs extends beyond the immediate battle. Orcs who have fled from a dreadnought carry that memory with them. The next time they encounter a dreadnought, even in a different battle with different circumstances, that memory colors their response. They remember how helpless they felt, how ineffective their weapons were, how their strongest warriors died without slowing the machine. This memory makes them more likely to break again, reducing the amount of pressure needed to trigger their flight response. Over time, orc forces that repeatedly encounter dreadnoughts and suffer defeats can develop what might be called institutional fear of these machines. The orcs pass on their experiences to newer greenskins, warning them about the walking dead things that cannot be hurt and kill with one punch. These warnings, meant to prepare younger orcs for what they might face, instead prime them to fear dreadnoughts even before the first encounter. When these orcs finally do face a dreadnought, they enter combat with their confidence already compromised, making them even more vulnerable to breaking. Space Marine chapters that regularly fight orcs understand this dynamic and leverage it deliberately. They deploy dreadnoughts not just as tactical assets, but as psychological warfare tools designed specifically to break orc morale. A single dreadnought, positioned correctly, can halt an entire orc assault by triggering the cascade of fear that shatters the WAG field. This force multiplication effect makes dreadnoughts extraordinarily valuable in anti-orc operations, worth far more than their already considerable direct combat capability would suggest. The contrast with how orcs respond to other threats is instructive. Orcs will fight against overwhelming odds, will charge into prepared defensive positions, will assault fortified bunkers with nothing but their choppers, all without breaking. They will take horrific casualties and keep coming as long as they believe they have some chance of victory,
some way to hurt the enemy. But
against Dreadnoughts, this usual Orc fearlessness proves fragile because the Dreadnought removes the fundamental conditions that sustain Orc courage. The Deaf Dread paradox. One of the most interesting aspects of Orc fear of Space Marine Dreadnoughts is that Orcs build their own version of walking armored combat platforms in the form of Deaf Dreads. These Orc war machines superficially resemble Space Marine Dreadnoughts, being bipedal walkers armed with multiple weapons and providing their pilots with significant protection. The existence of Deaf Dreads might suggest that Orcs understand the value of such machines and should not fear Space Marine versions. Yet the reality demonstrates exactly why Space Marine Dreadnoughts are so much more terrifying than their Orc equivalents. A Deaf Dread is created when an Orc pilot volunteers to be permanently hardwired into a walking war machine by a painboy and mechboy working together. This is not a small commitment. The Orc must give up his normal life, his ability to move freely among his fellows, even much of his natural Orkiness, in exchange for becoming one of the biggest and most dangerous combatants in the warband. Many Orcs volunteer for this process because being encased in a Deaf Dread makes them proper Ard and gives them access to more Daka than they could ever carry as regular Orcs. The typical Deaf Dread bristles with weapons, often mounting up to 4 different weapon systems on its various arms and sponsons. It might carry a combination of big shooters for laying down suppressive fire, rockets for destroying vehicles, scorchers for dealing with infantry, and massive power claws for tearing apart enemies in melee. This loadout makes Deaf Dreads formidable opponents and valued assets in any Orc. Wow! When they work properly, Deaf Dreads can wade into combat and cause tremendous damage before anyone manages to bring them down. But when they work properly is a crucial qualifier for any Orc technology, and Deaf Dreads are no exception to the usual reliability issues that plague Orc equipment. Built from scrap metal, held together by crude welds and the unconscious psychic field that makes Orc technology function at all, Deaf Dreads are prone to mechanical failures, weapon jams, and structural collapses. The Orc pilot's cybernetic connection to the machine can malfunction, causing him to lose control or experience agonizing feedback. The power plant might surge or fail entirely. The weapons might explode rather than fire. More fundamentally, the quality of construction and materials used in a Deaf Dread cannot compare to Space Marine Dreadnought engineering. Where a Space Marine Dreadnought is built from adamantium and ceramite by tech priests who follow patterns that date back to the dark age of technology, a Deaf Dread is slapped together from whatever scrap metal the mechboy can find. Where the Space Marine Dreadnought's armor can withstand direct hits from anti-tank weapons, the Deaf Dread's armor, while thick, is often full of weak points where different plates are joined together inadequately. Where the Space Marine Dreadnought's weapons are precision-manufactured instruments of war, the Deaf Dread's weapons are crude copies built without detailed understanding of why certain design features matter. The pilots present an even more dramatic contrast. A Space Marine Dreadnought is piloted by a veteran hero of the chapter, often one who has served for decades or centuries before his internment, and continues to accumulate combat experience across potentially millennia of service. These pilots are tactical geniuses, masters of warfare, who understand not just how to fight, but why certain tactics work, and how to adapt them to any situation. They are supported by centuries of chapter history and tactical doctrine, able to draw on accumulated wisdom that spans their entire chapter's existence. An Orc Deaf Dread pilot, by contrast, is just an Orc who volunteered to get stuffed into a metal can. He might be a particularly enthusiastic Orc or one who is slightly crazy even by Orc standards, but he is still operating on the same basic Orc instincts and knowledge as his non-entombed fellows. He has no sophisticated training, no centuries of accumulated wisdom, no tactical doctrine beyond charge forward and crump things. The process of being cybernetically hardwired into the Deaf Dread often drives the pilot at least partially insane, making them even less capable of sophisticated tactical thinking than they were before. This difference in pilot quality manifests immediately in how the two types of walkers fight. A Space Marine dreadnought positions itself carefully, uses terrain to its advantage, coordinates with supporting forces, and selects targets based on tactical priorities. A Death Dread charges forward in whatever direction seems to have the most enemies, firing all its weapons simultaneously at anything that moves, and attacks with the same chaotic enthusiasm as any other Ork. The Death Dread might cause significant damage through sheer volume of fire and the momentum of its charge, but it is not fighting smart, merely fighting hard. When a Death Dread faces a Space Marine dreadnought, the disparity becomes painfully obvious. The Space Marine dreadnought recognizes the Death Dread as a priority target, one that poses an actual threat unlike most Ork weapons. It positions itself to engage the Death Dread in a way that minimizes exposure to supporting Ork fire, while maximizing its own advantages. It targets the Death Dread's weak points, the crude joints and welds that represent structural vulnerabilities in the Ork machine. It waits for optimal moments to strike, rather than simply exchanging blows in a straightforward brawl. The Death Dread, operating on Ork logic, charges directly at the Space Marine dreadnought and begins attacking with all its weapons simultaneously. This seems like a reasonable Ork approach, bringing maximum force to bear and trusting in Ork strength and toughness to prevail. But against the precision and tactical acumen of the Space Marine pilot, this straightforward approach proves disastrously inadequate. The Space Marine dreadnought evades or blocks the Death Dread's attacks, while landing devastating counterstrikes on vulnerable points. The fight is brutally one-sided, despite the Death Dread's impressive firepower and armor. Other Orks watching this engagement receive a devastating psychological blow. They can understand losing to an enemy who is simply bigger and tougher than they are. But watching their own walking war machine, something they built specifically to compete with enemy-heavy assets, gets systematically dismantled by a Space Marine dreadnought suggests that the gulf in capability is not just about size or weapons, but something more fundamental. Their best effort at creating a machine to match the enemy has proven hopelessly inadequate, which implies that perhaps no amount of Ork ingenuity or enthusiasm can overcome this particular opponent. This paradox, that Orks build their own dread equivalents, yet still fear Space Marine dreadnoughts, actually reinforces the psychological impact rather than diminishing it. The existence of Death Dreads means Orks understand the concept of armored walkers and appreciate their combat value. But the consistent failure of Death Dreads against Space Marine dreadnoughts demonstrates that understanding the concept is not enough. The Orks can copy the form, they can build crude approximations of the concept, but they cannot replicate the engineering excellence, tactical doctrine, and pilot expertise that makes Space Marine dreadnoughts truly terrifying. Some Ork mech boys have attempted to capture or loot Space Marine dreadnoughts to bridge this capability gap. A few rare instances exist in Imperial records of Orks managing to board and overwhelm a damaged dreadnought, killing or removing the pilot and attempting to repurpose the machine for their own use. These efforts almost universally fail because Ork technical understanding cannot properly maintain or operate technology this sophisticated. The dreadnought might function briefly on residual power and programmed responses, but it quickly breaks down as Ork repairs compromise critical systems. The irony is that Orks respect strength and size, and they should theoretically respect the strength and size embodied by dreadnoughts. In many ways, a Space Marine dreadnought represents the Ork ideal of a perfect warrior carried to its logical extreme, massive, heavily armed, nearly indestructible, and dedicated entirely to combat. This should make dreadnoughts objects of Ork admiration rather than fear. But the cold, mechanical nature of dreadnoughts, their lack of Ork-style enthusiasm and joy in combat, makes them alien and disturbing to the Ork psyche, even as their capability earns grudging respect. An Ork facing a dreadnought experiences conflicting emotions that are unusual and disturbing for him. He respects the Dreadnought's size and power. He fears its weapons and armor. He is confused by its methodical, joyless approach to combat. He is frustrated by his inability to hurt it, despite his best efforts. These conflicting feelings create a psychological state that Orks rarely experience and have no cultural frameworks for processing. An Ork knows how to respond to an enemy who is bigger and stronger. He challenges them to prove his own worth. But how does he respond to an enemy that is bigger, stronger, unkillable, and does not care about his challenge or his courage? This existential confusion compounds the fear that Dreadnoughts inspire. It is not just that Dreadnoughts can kill Orks easily. It is that they do so in a way that makes the Ork feel meaningless, that strips away the sense of participating in a glorious scrap and reduces the experience to being slaughtered by an implacable machine that views them as problems to be solved, rather than warriors to be fought. For a species whose entire identity revolves around combat and proving their strength through battle, this dehumanization, or de-orkification is perhaps more psychologically damaging than the physical destruction itself. The ripple effects. Through Ork society, the impact of Dreadnoughts on Ork forces extends beyond individual battles and manifests in how Ork society and Wagj culture adapt to the threat they represent. When Ork survivors from encounters with Dreadnoughts return to their broader warbands, they bring with them stories and warnings that spread through Ork social networks in ways that affect future operations and the development of Ork tactics and psychology. Orks are natural storytellers, and combat experiences form the primary currency of Ork social interaction. Around campfires and in mech shops, Orks trade tales of great fights, impressive enemies, and spectacular violence. These stories serve multiple purposes in Ork society. They establish the teller's credentials as a veteran worth listening to. They provide entertainment for Orks between fights, helping sustain their enthusiasm during the downtime that all military forces must occasionally endure. And crucially, they pass on practical information about different enemy types and how to fight them. When an Ork who has fought a Dreadnought and survived begins telling his story, other Orks gather to listen with more attention than usual. The survivor describes the size of the machine, the sound of its weapons, the sight of boys being pulverized by its attacks. He details how their weapons bounced off its armor, how it advanced without fear or hesitation, how it seemed to predict their tactics before they even tried them. The listening Orks absorb this information and their enthusiastic responses. "That's proper scary, that is." Or, "We's gonna need more darker to stop that thing," reveal that the story has affected them. These stories spread through the Ork social network with remarkable speed. Orks who hear them retell them to others, often embellishing details to make themselves seem more knowledgeable or the Dreadnought seem even more impressive. A Dreadnought that was perhaps 3 meters tall in reality grows to 4 or 5 meters in the retelling. Its weapons, already fearsome, become even more destructive in the stories. The veteran who faced it becomes more heroic simply for surviving the encounter. This exaggeration actually serves the Imperium's interests because it makes Dreadnoughts seem even more terrifying than they already are. The cumulative effect of these stories is to create a cultural awareness of Dreadnoughts as particular threats within Ork Wag society. Young Orks who have never seen a Dreadnought already know to fear them from the stories they have heard. This preconditioned fear means that when these Orks encounter their first Dreadnought, they are primed to break more easily than they might have if they had no prior knowledge. The stories have done the psychological warfare work before the Dreadnought even arrives on the battlefield. Some Ork mech boys respond to these stories by trying to develop specific anti-Dreadnought weapons or tactics. They build bigger guns, reinforce certain def dreads specifically to counter Space Marine Dreadnoughts, or devise schemes for luring Dreadnoughts into traps. These efforts are typically crude and often ineffective, because Ork engineering and tactical planning cannot match Space Marine sophistication. A mech boy might build a truly enormous shooter that he claims can punch through Dreadnought armor, only to have it explode when fired or fail to penetrate when it does manage to hit. But the very existence of these efforts reveals how deeply Dreadnoughts have impressed themselves on Ork consciousness. In a species that normally relies on overwhelming numbers and enthusiasm rather than sophisticated tactics or specialized equipment, the dedication of resources and effort to countering a specific enemy type is unusual. It suggests that Orks recognize Dreadnoughts as problems that cannot be solved through normal Ork approaches, that require special attention and planning. This recognition itself represents a victory for the psychological warfare aspect of Dreadnought deployment. Ork war bosses, who have lost significant forces to Dreadnought, encounters sometimes develop specific strategies for dealing with them in future battles. These strategies typically revolve around trying to avoid fighting Dreadnoughts directly when possible, focusing fire from multiple sources to hopefully penetrate their armor, or attempting to bypass them entirely and attack objectives that the Dreadnoughts cannot reach quickly enough to defend. The sophistication of these strategies varies wildly depending on the war boss's intelligence and experience, but even crude versions represent unusual tactical thinking for Orks. The most cunning Ork war bosses understand that the psychological impact of Dreadnoughts can be managed through leadership and force of personality. They make a point of being personally present when Dreadnoughts attack, using their own size and authority to prevent their boys from routing. Some particularly bold war bosses make a show of attacking Dreadnoughts themselves, reasoning that if the boss is willing to fight the scary machine, the other Orks should be too. This sometimes works to maintain morale, though it often results in dead war bosses when they discover that courage alone cannot overcome the capability gap. These war boss deaths create their own ripple effects through Ork society. Other ambitious Orks take note that challenging Dreadnoughts is extremely dangerous even for the biggest and toughest greenskins. This knowledge influences their behavior when they eventually become war bosses themselves, making them more cautious about how they deploy their forces against enemies known to field Dreadnoughts. This caution, unusual for Orks, represents another way that Dreadnoughts reshape Ork tactical culture simply by existing as threats. The long-term effect of sustained Dreadnought-inflicted defeats on Ork populations is difficult to measure, but appears to create lasting changes in local Ork culture. In regions where Space Marine chapters make frequent use of Dreadnoughts against Ork invasions, the surviving Ork populations develop what might be called Dreadnought awareness, a cultural memory of these machines and their effectiveness. This awareness manifests as reduced enthusiasm for attacking Space Marine positions, increased willingness to retreat when Dreadnoughts appear, and greater effort invested in trying to develop counters to these machines. These changes do not make the Orks less dangerous in any absolute sense. They still represent a significant military threat and will attack with their usual ferocity when they believe they have advantages. But it does make them somewhat more predictable and easier to manipulate through selective Dreadnought deployment. A Space Marine force that can credibly threaten to deploy Dreadnoughts can sometimes shape Ork behavior and force them to attack less favorable objectives or through less advantageous routes, simply because the Orks want to avoid the Dreadnought threat. Interestingly, these adaptations can create vulnerabilities that clever Imperial commanders exploit. If Orks become conditioned to fear and avoid Dreadnoughts, then the mere appearance of a Dreadnought on one part of the battlefield can cause Ork forces to shift away from that area, creating openings elsewhere that faster Imperial forces can exploit. The Dreadnought becomes not just a direct combat asset, but a tool for shaping the battlefield and directing enemy movement. Some inquisitors and military theorists have studied this phenomenon and recommended increased Dreadnought deployment in long-running anti-Ork campaigns, specifically for these psychological and cultural effects. They argue that while Dreadnoughts are valuable in any engagement, their long-term impact on Ork behavior makes them especially cost-effective when fighting greenskin incursions. The hope is that by consistently using dreadnoughts and ensuring high survival rates among Orc witnesses, Imperial forces can cultivate a terror of these machines that will make future campaigns against the same Orc populations easier. This represents an understanding that warfare against Orcs operates on two levels simultaneously. On the immediate tactical level, killing as many Orcs as possible and breaking their current assault remains paramount. But on the strategic level, shaping how the surviving Orcs think about Imperial capabilities and creating psychological vulnerabilities that will affect their behavior in future conflicts can be equally valuable. Dreadnoughts serve both purposes superbly, making them among the most effective weapons in the Imperial arsenal for long-term anti-Orc operations. Tales from the battlefields of Armageddon. The wars for Armageddon provide numerous examples of dreadnoughts breaking Orc assaults and the psychological impact these encounters had on greenskin forces. Armageddon, that critical hive world, has been the site of 3 major Orc invasions, each involving millions of combatants and providing valuable data on how different forces interact in sustained combat. Space Marine dreadnoughts played crucial roles in all 3 wars, their deployments often marking turning points in battles that seemed lost. During the Second War for Armageddon, when warlord Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka brought a massive WAG to the planet, Imperial forces found themselves desperately outnumbered and outgunned. The Orc horde that descended on Armageddon was vast beyond comprehension, driven by the most cunning and dangerous warboss to arise in millennia. Standard Imperial defensive tactics proved inadequate against the sheer scale of the invasion. Entire regiments of Imperial Guard were overrun in hours. Hive cities that should have held for months fell in weeks. The situation grew so desperate that multiple Space Marine chapters were called in to assist. Among the Space Marine reinforcements were numerous dreadnoughts, ancient warriors awakened from their slumber specifically for this dire emergency. These venerable machines deployed to the most critical points in the defensive lines, places where Orc assaults threatened to break through and shatter Imperial formations entirely. The dreadnoughts' arrival often coincided with moments when Imperial forces were on the verge of breaking, their ammunition running low, their casualties mounting, their morale beginning to crack. One recorded instance from this period describes a Crimson Fist's dreadnought named Venerable Brother Rhodomanus, who held a critical bridge crossing against repeated Orc assaults for over 3 days straight. The Orcs, recognizing the bridge as a key access point to a major supply depot, threw wave after wave of boys at the position, each assault larger and more frenzied than the last. Brother Rhodomanus stood in the center of the bridge, his assault cannon never ceasing, his power fist crushing any Orc that reached him. The psychological impact of this single dreadnought on the Orc assaults was documented by Imperial observers. Initially, the Orcs charged the bridge with their typical enthusiasm, certain that they could overwhelm any defender through sheer numbers. But as the hours turned to days, and the pile of Orc corpses around the dreadnought grew into a small mountain, the character of the assaults changed. Later waves of Orcs approached more hesitantly, their advance faltering as they saw the carnage ahead of them. Some Orcs refused to charge entirely, forcing their nobs to beat them forward at gunpoint. By the 3rd day, the Orcs had effectively given up on taking the bridge, despite still having forces available to attempt additional assaults. The psychological cost of attacking the position, of facing this implacable machine that had killed thousands of their fellows without showing any sign of weakening, had become too high. When Imperial reinforcements finally arrived to relieve Brother Rhodomanus, they found him still standing, still functional, surrounded by Orc bodies, stacked so deep they threatened to clog the bridge entirely. The Orcs had chosen to bypass this position entirely, rather than continue feeding their boys into what they had come to see as a meat grinder. Another account from the Third War for Armageddon describes a Black Templars strike force that included 3 dreadnoughts deploying against a massive Orc war camp in the Deadlands region. The camp, home to thousands of Orcs from the Bloodscar tribe, was considered a major staging point for Orc operations in that sector. The Black Templars' initial assault faltered when they encountered heavier Orc resistance than anticipated, finding themselves pinned down and taking casualties. The 3 Dreadnoughts, which had been held in reserve, were deployed directly into the heart of the Orc camp via drop pod. The sight and sound of these machines emerging from the crashed drop pods, their weapons already firing, created instant panic among the Orcs. The greenskins nearest the drop site fled immediately, having heard stories about Dreadnoughts and recognizing the danger. Their flight triggered a chain reaction as other Orcs, seeing their fellows running and hearing the distinctive sounds of Dreadnought combat, began to panic as well. Within minutes, the entire Orc camp descended into chaos as thousands of greenskins simultaneously tried to either flee or fight the Dreadnoughts, with different groups reaching different conclusions about which approach was more survivable. This internal confusion allowed the rest of the Black Templars' force to break free from the position where they had been pinned and push into the camp. The battle, which had seemed on the verge of becoming a disaster for the Imperial forces, turned into a rout as the Orc command structure collapsed and their forces scattered across the Deadlands. The commander of the Black Templars' force, Marshal Brandt, specifically noted in his after-action report that the deployment of the Dreadnoughts accomplished more through psychological warfare than through direct combat effectiveness. While the 3 machines certainly killed large numbers of Orcs, the panic their presence caused was responsible for far more Orc casualties as greenskins trampled each other in their rush to escape or fought among themselves about whether to stand and fight or run. The Dreadnoughts had not just won a battle, but had broken the cohesion of an entire Orc tribe in a way that would take months for the greenskins to recover from. Not all Dreadnought deployments achieved such clear-cut successes, and some records describe instances where even these formidable machines were overwhelmed by sheer Orc numbers or concentrated anti-armor fire. During particularly desperate fighting in Hive Acheron, a Salamander's Dreadnought named Brother Tavius found himself surrounded by Orcs after pushing too far ahead of supporting forces. Despite killing hundreds of greenskins, Brother Tavius was eventually brought down when Orc tank busters managed to land several rocket hits on his joints, compromising his mobility and allowing swarms of boys to climb onto him and attack his sarcophagus directly. But even in this defeat, the psychological impact favored the Imperium. The Orcs who participated in bringing down Brother Tavius spoke afterward of it being the best fight ever, specifically because of how difficult it had been and how many of their fellows had died in the effort. They had proven that Dreadnoughts could be killed, but at such horrific cost that the lesson they drew was less, we can beat Dacefings, and more, we need lots more boys and all the rockets to even hurt one. This understanding made subsequent Orc forces more cautious about engaging Dreadnoughts, requiring them to mass forces specifically for anti-Dreadnought operations, rather than attacking opportunistically. The veteran Dreadnought, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the oldest living space marine in the Imperium, participated in operations on Armageddon during the Third War, despite his incredible age. Bjorn's presence on the battlefield had psychological effects that went beyond even typical Dreadnought intimidation. This was a warrior who had fought alongside Leman Russ himself during the Great Crusade, who had been ancient when the Imperium was young, who represented a living connection to an age of myth. When Orcs encountered Bjorn, they faced not just a Dreadnought but a legend made manifest. Reports describe Orcs actually fleeing at the mere sight of Bjorn in some engagements, before he had fired a shot or struck a blow. The combination of his massive, ornately decorated chassis, the chapter honors and purity seals, covering every surface, and the sheer presence that emanated from this ancient warrior created an aura of inevitable doom. Orcs who stood and fought against Bjorn did so without their usual enthusiasm, fighting defensively and looking for opportunities to escape rather than pressing attacks with their typical aggression. One captured Orc, when interrogated about his experiences fighting against Bjorn, could only describe it as like fighting death itself, but death is also really mad at you. These examples from Armageddon illustrate multiple aspects of how dreadnoughts affect orc psychology. The sustained defensive stands demonstrate how a single dreadnought can anchor a defensive position and make it psychologically impossible for orcs to overcome. The aggressive deployments into orc camps show how the shock value of dreadnought appearances can shatter orc cohesion even when they have numerical superiority. The rare defeats prove that dreadnoughts are not invincible, but also demonstrate that killing them costs the orcs so much that the victory is Pyrrhic at best. And the legendary figures like Bjorn show how reputation and mystique compound the baseline intimidation that all dreadnoughts provide. The orc populations that survived these encounters on Armageddon carried their experiences away with them when they were eventually driven off the planet. These survivors spread throughout the Imperium, joining other wags or starting their own. Wherever they went, they brought stories of the metal monsters they had faced on Armageddon. Stories that influenced how other orcs thought about space marines and shaped their expectations for future battles. In this way, the dreadnought deployments on Armageddon had ripple effects throughout orc populations across multiple sectors, making all of them slightly more cautious and slightly more defeatable when they eventually encountered dreadnoughts themselves. Conclusion: the eternal war between unstoppable force and immovable object. In the endless darkness of the 41st millennium, where war is the only constant and peace exists only as brief pauses between conflicts, the encounter between orc wargs and space marine dreadnoughts represents something profound about the nature of warfare itself. These clashes embody the meeting of two entirely different philosophies of conflict, two radically different ways of understanding what it means to fight and why battles are won or lost. Orcs approach warfare with pure enthusiasm and conviction that aggression, size, and numbers will ultimately prevail over any opposition. They charge into battle with absolute confidence, certain that their strength and willingness to fight will carry them through any challenge. This approach has served them well across millions of worlds and tens of thousands of years. The orc species has thrived in the galaxy precisely because this philosophy works more often than it fails. Against most enemies, overwhelming them with green-skinned violence proves effective. But dreadnoughts represent something that contradicts every assumption underlying orc military doctrine. They are bigger and stronger than any orc. They are better armored than orc technology can defeat. They are piloted by warriors whose experience and tactical acumen make orc cunning seem crude by comparison. Most fundamentally, they are immune to the psychological warfare that orcs use so effectively against other species. The intimidation, the aggressive displays, the overwhelming numbers and noise, none of these affect a dreadnought pilot who has already died once and who has seen worse horrors across centuries of service. When these two forces meet on the battlefield, something has to give. The orc charge, that green tide that has overwhelmed countless enemies, breaks against the adamantium and ceramite of dreadnought armor. The orc weapons, effective against most enemies, prove useless against defenses designed to withstand anti-tank fire. The orc strength, impressive by biological standards, seems pathetic when measured against tons of servo-driven force. And the orc psychology, built around collective confidence and mutual reinforcement, shatters when confronted with proof that their fundamental beliefs about combat are insufficient. This is not simply about one weapon system being superior to another. It is about an existential crisis forced upon a species whose entire identity revolves around being the biggest and toughest fighters in the galaxy. An orc who encounters a dreadnought and survives must integrate the experience into his worldview somehow. He must reconcile what he saw, the ease with which his fellows were destroyed, the futility of their weapons, the helplessness they all felt, with his continued belief that orcs are meant to win fights through strength and enthusiasm. Most orcs resolve this cognitive dissonance through rationalization. They decide that the particular circumstances were unfavorable, that they did not have enough Daka, that they need to come back with more boys or better weapons. This rationalization preserves their essential confidence, while acknowledging that they need to adapt. But it also means they enter future encounters with dreadnoughts, already expecting difficulty, already prepared to flee if conditions seem unfavorable, already lacking the absolute confidence that normally sustains Ork charges. For Space Marine chapters that regularly fight Orks, understanding this psychological dynamic and leveraging it through strategic dreadnought deployment has become standard doctrine. The Marines know that a single well-placed dreadnought can break Ork assaults that would overwhelm conventional defenses. They understand that the psychological impact of dreadnoughts extends far beyond individual battles, affecting how Ork populations think about Space Marines and approach future conflicts. This makes dreadnoughts not just tactical assets, but strategic weapons in the long campaign to contain greenskin expansion. The relationship between Orks and dreadnoughts will continue evolving as long as both exist in the galaxy. Orks will continue trying to develop counters, building bigger guns and more heavily armored def dreads in attempts to match Space Marine capabilities. Some particularly cunning war bosses will develop tactics that minimize Ork exposure to dreadnoughts or exploit the machine's relatively slow speed. Ork culture will continue to pass on stories and warnings about these metal monsters, ensuring that every young Ork has heard of them before his first encounter. But Space Marines will also continue to refine their use of dreadnoughts in anti-Ork operations. New dreadnought patterns, like the Redemptor and Brutalis, offer enhanced capabilities specifically useful against mass infantry assaults. Chapters share information about particularly effective deployment strategies and learn from instances where dreadnoughts were defeated or bypassed. The ancient pilots within these machines accumulate even more experience fighting Orks, their already formidable expertise growing with each campaign. This eternal evolution ensures that neither side will achieve permanent dominance. The Orks will never develop a reliable counter to dreadnoughts, because doing so would require a level of engineering sophistication and tactical discipline that contradicts fundamental aspects of Ork nature. But dreadnoughts will also never completely eliminate the Ork threat because greenskins are too numerous, too widely dispersed, and too quick to reproduce for any weapon to truly defeat them permanently. The cycle continues, battles won and lost, Orks advancing and retreating, dreadnoughts standing and fighting across battlefields that span the galaxy. In the end, the fear that Orks feel when facing dreadnoughts in close combat is not simply about physical danger or the likelihood of death. Orks accept death in combat as natural and even desirable if it comes in a good fight. What frightens them about dreadnoughts is the realization that they are completely outmatched, that no amount of enthusiasm or courage or strength will let them win this fight, that they are not facing another warrior, but confronting a fundamental limitation in their own capabilities. For a species defined by their confidence and aggression, this realization is more devastating than any weapon could be. Yet even this fear serves the galaxy in its own strange way. By making Orks hesitant and cautious, by breaking their charges and forcing them to retreat, dreadnoughts buy time for Imperial forces to reinforce threatened positions and evacuate civilians from war zones. The psychological impact of these ancient warriors ripples across space and time, affecting battles they are not physically present for simply because Orks elsewhere have heard stories about them and adjusted their behavior accordingly. In the endless war for humanity's survival, this force, multiplication, proves invaluable. So the dreadnoughts continue their vigil, these walking tombs containing warriors who should have died centuries ago, but who serve still because duty demands it. They stand against the green tide, implacable and eternal, breaking wave after wave of Ork attackers through a combination of superior capability and psychological warfare refined across millennia. And the Orks continue to come, driven by their nature to fight and conquer, but now with a whisper of doubt in their hearts when they hear the distinctive sound of servo motors and mechanical footfalls announcing a dreadnought's approach. This is the nature of warfare in the grim darkness of the far future, where even the most fearless warriors can be made to fear, where ancient heroes fight on long after death should have claimed them, and where the psychological scars of battle can echo across generations and reshape entire cultures. The Dreadnought stands at the intersection of all these themes, a weapon that kills with steel and ammunition, but whose most effective ammunition might be the terror it inspires in enemies who thought themselves incapable of fear. If you enjoyed learning about why orcs fear fighting dreadnoughts in close combat, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into Warhammer 40k lore. There's always more stories to tell from the grim darkness of the far future, and we'll be bringing you the most comprehensive coverage of the battles, heroes, and horrors that define this incredible universe. The Emperor protects, and so do his dreadnoughts.